This is the reason why wrestling is where it's at. Welcome to a very special edition of Wrestling Resource Television. I'm your host, P.L. Myers. We're here at Dream Night 5. This man has been on the show. You see him at the beginning of the show. He needs no introduction, but I will do my best. He is the excellence of execution. He is the one and only Bret, the Hitman Hart.
Nice to meet you.
First of all, welcome to Chicago. Your thoughts on coming to Chicago? You're here at Dream Night 5. As you probably look through the window, you see all your adoring fans here for tonight.
Well, you know, Chicago has always been a very special place for me. I think, you know, there's a lot of cities that I had a lot of great moments happen, but I don't know that there's any better than any city that's better than Chicago.
And with you, the history of your family is just world renowned. I mean, the Hart family. I mean, you knew when you were growing up that this was going to be your career?
Yeah, I got into wrestling, and as a kid, I mean, I was always followed it really closely, and I really think as a kid I studied it. I mean, I remember watching matches, and I was privileged in that sense that I got to watch a lot of the really great wrestlers like Pat O'Connor, and Harley Race, and Luthez. I mean, a lot of the wrestlers today, the younger wrestlers, even the wrestlers like, I'll just say Shawn Michaels as an example. I never got to see Luthez and Pat O'Connor wrestle. And I mean, I got to watch them wrestle for an hour, you know. Buddy Rogers, Whipper Watson, a lot of these names that don't ring too many bells anymore. And I really studied wrestling as a kid, when I could have been doing better in school and things like that. I really had a good understanding of wrestling without ever really knowing that I was going to follow into it. I think I grew up always believing that someday I'll be a wrestler, but when I got to be about 15, being a wrestler, you know, it wasn't as cool to me. I started to think that my father lived a life away from home all the time, was gone all the time, and I didn't welcome that kind of lifestyle. And then, of course, that's what I did for most of my life anyway.
Now, when you were growing up and you got into the business, did you try to pattern yourself after these legends like Luthez? Because the style, like your father, you know, was more of the stretching and the holds. I mean, would you just start using that as your repertoire when you first started and kind of a trademark of these guys?
Well, I never really, you know, I don't even know if I intended to be an original, but I'm an original. There's only one Bret Hart. Nobody ever wrestled like me, and nobody ever imitated. Well, there might be guys that imitate me now, but I never tried to pattern myself after anybody. I'm not like Ric Flair trying to be Buddy Rogers, or I was always somebody that was. I think I fell into it, and I always wanted. I think from the time I got into it, I wanted to stand on my own. I always, if integrity means anything, I would try to emulate my father. I always wanted to be respected. I never wanted to. I didn't fancy myself as a shooter or a tough guy necessarily, but I was always respected by my fellow wrestlers, and I always was good for my word and was somebody that they could trust.
Well, with you growing up with all these different wrestlers, were your heroes when you were growing up initially, were they wrestlers or were they hockey players? Because I know you are different from athletes, or was it more of your father because he was such an influence to your?
Well, I think I had heroes in every kind of. I was. For example, I was a big Roberto Clemente baseball player. Was my favorite baseball player as a kid, and of course, Bobby Orr was a big hero to me, and it kind of goes from everywhere. I mean, I really I was a big. I never knew that wrestling was going to be my calling, but I mean, I had a lot of football heroes and hockey heroes and baseball heroes.
So were you also a Stan Mikita fan?
I did like Stan Mikita, but and I did meet him one time. I met him here in Chicago at a Blackhawk game before he ever became a wrestler, and I did meet him. He was. I always found that hockey people were very classy and they're always gentlemen, and Stan Mikita's as good as any of them. You know.
So Bobby Orr was your main guy.
Bobby Orr, Bobby Orr for sure was my favorite hockey player. Of course, as I got older and while I was wrestling, Gretzky was always a hero to me anyway. He just played so damn good.
And when you got in the business, I mean, was it everything your parents told you about? But was it just totally a whole different world?
I came at the right time, I think, and I got into it at the right time. But it changed. I got worked for my father for 6 years, and it was always a lot of fun, and it wasn't very profitable, but it was a lot of fun, and there was always, in a lot of ways, the characters were deeper and more human back then. And then the WWF came along, and about 6 years after I started. And if someone had told me when I started wrestling that wrestling would turn into what it has, I would never have believed it. I kind of got into wrestling when it wasn't a whole lot different than being a topless dancer kind of thing. It was kind of almost a bit of a seedy industry, but it was different in the sense that there was a lot of really tough men in it, and it was a very, always has been and probably always will be a rugged business, whether you understand the dynamics of pro wrestling. But I mean, the characters and the people in it have always been pretty tough guys.
I know your father was such a huge influence. What was one of the main or two things that you really got, like after you got in the business, you said, boy, he was right on the money, and what did he teach you to help you sustain this?
Some of the simplest, best advice my father always gave me was to save your money, and I remember my dad used to always say, never let anyone take away your dignity or your respect, because if you lose that, you don't have much left after that. And, I always tried to carry those words with me.
Do you remember your first match?
Yeah, I do. I wrestled against, my very, very first match was against the two Japanese wrestlers that taught me. And I was a pretty good student when I got into wrestling. But when I had my first match, I mean, they beat the tar out of me. And I remember I came back from the match, and I think I said this in my DVD, but I actually thought they were mad at me and that I'd done so bad, But it turned out that they were really proud of me, and they just gave me what was right out there, and they gave me a good, they pounded the daylights out of me, but it was what the fans would have expected of them with me at that time.
When you first started out, I know when you're in a ring and you're working with different nationalities and stuff, and the holds are different names and stuff, was it hard to pick up sometimes? Because wrestling is international, but sometimes, when you're in the ring, it kind of changes on you.
Well, I guess, because I worked in the Stampede Wrestling territory, there was, it was, in a lot of ways, was the perfect place to wrestle because, or to start anyway, because Calgary it wasn't just loaded up with Canadians, and it wasn't just loaded up with Americans. It was loaded up with Mexicans, Japanese wrestlers, German wrestlers, English wrestlers. There was a real mix of a lot of sort of international flavors. Plus, on top of that, there was always a lot of young wrestlers. There was always a place for the old-timers to finish up their career, and it was a place for the young rookies to start. So in a lot of ways, you were getting a lot of experience, and you were seeing a lot of things firsthand,
Did it make it more fun, I guess, because, wrestling has its ups and downs, but because your family was involved, different, would it make it more fun, or is it sometimes difficult because, mixing family and business sometimes?
Well, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it was some of my best memories are with my brothers, and at the same time, there was sometimes there was too many cooks in the kitchen, so you get the best of both of that.
And with everything that you've done, all the titles, is there one title that sticks out in your head that's like, you made it and you were proud of it?
Well, I'll say I was really proud of every title I won, including even the WCW. I don't know if they were the greatest memories I've had, but I mean, I know when I was champion that I really believed in myself that I would try to make a difference as that champion. So, I mean, it was important to me. But the very first world title win was the most important one.
And who was that against, and what was it?
Against Ric Flair.
Okay.
Even though it wasn't necessarily my greatest match. It was not a good match, but it was just something about being able to touch that dream. Like I said, if you told me when I was 8 years old that I was going to be world heavyweight wrestling champion, I might have believed it.
Yeah.
But if you told me when I was 20 that I would be world heavyweight wrestling champion, I wouldn't have believed it.
Now, did you also, because most wrestlers say, sometimes my best matches are the ones not on television. Did you have certain ones that stood out?
Oh yeah, lots of them. I had lots of them. But as a matter of fact, I had a match with the Bulldogs right here in Chicago that I remember when I came back after the match, Terry Funk came up to me and told me, he says, that's the best tag team match I've ever seen.
Wow.
And he goes, I've seen them all. I've seen them every tag team you can think of, but you guys, the four of you in there, that's the best tag team match I've ever saw.
With, I mean, you are a one of a kind. You mentioned Bret the Hitman Hart. There's no like, that wrestler? No, there's only one. I mean, you've gotten to the level where you're at the top of the class. I mean, whatever ranking it is, you are like up there. What's your thoughts? Because we've covered guys like Michael Jordan, Ric Flair, the Road Warriors, all these, the greats of the business, and you're considered the great of the business. I mean, what do you see when you step back from the action figures, the toys, and everything you've accomplished in your career?
Well, I sometimes they seem a little more reserved about sort of boasting that I was the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, that whole quote. And then sometimes lately, like, I'm feeling a sort of a resurgence of sort of pride in what I did, and I keep kind of asking myself a lot of the time, like, who was really better than me? And I won't take a back seat to anybody anyway. And I really, when you understand wrestling the way I do, there's a certain respect and integrity and honor that goes in wrestling each and every wrestler that you work with. And over a 23-year career, I never injured one wrestler ever. I never, I don't know if I even broke a fingernail or a hangnail on anybody. And I take a lot of pride in that today. And I go, I wish that, when people, rate me or talk about me, that they would understand that I was somebody that, it's one thing to watch wrestlers like there's some ways someone like Shawn Michaels might be more flashy or more does a lot more acrobatic kind of stuff, but it's not all just about acrobatics. I think I was a brilliant storyteller when it came to wrestling, and I was also somebody that never forgot his fans. I mean, I've always tried to reach out and connect with my fans wherever they are, and I still take a lot of pride in the level of fans that I have around the world. And the fact that I think I was always true to the wrestlers, I was always true to the wrestling, and I was always true to the fans. And sometimes I feel a little funny about trying to brag about how great I was, because wrestling fans, or maybe not wrestling fans, but there's a lot of people that try to, like the media, for example, the first and only wrestler they can really talk about or know about is Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan was a great showman. He was a great, he did a lot for the wrestling business. But, I think without trying to be, slight him in any way, I think that if you watched one Hulk Hogan match, you watched all of them. And he was more of a cartoon character. And I don't believe I was ever a cartoon character. And I believe you compare wrestlers, any wrestler today wrestling, you'll see that I stand with any of them as, Kurt Angle's a great wrestler, Benoit is a great wrestler. There's a lot of great wrestlers out there, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily better than them, but I wouldn't say they're better than me, that's for sure.
We'll be right back with more Wrestling Resource Television right after these seconds. 5, cool. Everything all good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, okay. What? 13. Okay, cool. 7 there, all right. We're back here on Wrestling Resource Television. I am here with Bret the Hitman Hart, and as you've been listening to, I will have to say, as a wrestling fan, as someone who tried to be a student of the game, there is no other one but Bret the Hitman Hart. And when you look at all the things that the business has changed, and you've talked about respect and pride, and a lot of people, forget about those words nowadays in the business, but for the fans that come up to you, who emulate you and say, hey, Bret, I want to be a wrestler, I want to be this or that, what kind of advice do you have for them?
That want to get into wrestling,
Yeah.
You mean? Well, I think what I always try to stress to them, that it's not about getting hurt. Wrestling's not about hardcore. It's not about hitting each other over the head with lead pipes and stuff like that. It's if you're hurting each other especially in a reckless, dangerous way, there's no art to that. You know, I pride myself on being I was anyway, a very physical wrestler. I could, I appeared to probably seriously injure a lot of wrestlers over the years, including myself. But in fact, that's the beauty of what I did. As I was an artist, and I was somebody that made wrestling. I made you suspend your disbelief or your belief all along for 15, 20 minutes and tell this, in a lot of ways, telling a beautiful story with my body. Every bit the same way an actor, acts with lines. I told a story with my body. I was very creative. I came up with a lot of things that I don't think anyone else ever thought of, like reversing a sharpshooter, or even taking a front turnbuckle. I don't know that anyone ever thought of that till I did. But I was always somebody that I think I was always a fan first. And I never looked at Bret Hart when I was thinking about what Bret Hart was going to do in the ring that night. I never looked at it from a business standpoint so much as I did from what my fans would expect of Bret Hart, the character. And if I was going to talk to young wrestlers today, I'd think that's what I would stress to them too. That it's not about getting hurt. It's about being unique and being always being safe. I mean, if you hear a lot of times in wrestlers that in wrestling, they say, I can do it 9 times out of 10 perfect. But that doesn't work in wrestling. If you do it 9 times out of 10 perfect, what about that one other time? That means you're gonna, shatter somebody's face or break somebody's neck. I wish Bill Goldberg had thought of that when he gave me the big boot in the head, and it really basically ended my career. But wrestling's not about getting hurt, and it's about going home to your family, and it's about making a living and respecting the guy you're working with.
Well, I think a lot of people respect what you've done. I mean, as far as the honor and dignity that you bring to yourself and the Hart family, and I think the one thing that separates you from most of the guys that you said as far as who could be number one, your connection to the fans. I mean, a guy could be popular, but to have the loyalty where all these people come into line and look for you, and the connection you have to your fans is so special.
Yeah, I think certain wrestlers that are like Hulk Hogan's a huge star. People still are marveled by the guy, and but he was, like I say, it's kind of a cartoon character, more of a freak show, if that makes any sense. But I think Guy was always very. I'm just the way I am. I mean, I'm Bret Hart. I never tried to be anything but myself after the matches. I didn't. It's not like you knock on my door and I got pink spandex on.
But I knocked on your door. They were there.
Hung up in the closet.
Oh, okay. But one of the people that you knew and I knew was Hawk. What were your fond memories of him? Because he was one of the originators of Dream Night, coming through all the time. I mean, your thoughts, because as I said, it meant a lot for me as a fan and someone in the business when you talked about him at the Hall of Fame. I mean, when you go to Hall of Fame, you think so many people, but to think of this fun stories of a good guy in the business.
Hawk was, he was a character. He was a guy that sort of superseded a lot of generations. Hawk could have easily hung around with my dad's era. He was a man's man, though, and the thing about Hawk used to kind of scare me sometimes, is that he would always drag Jim the Anvil out with him, and I knew whenever he did that I was gonna have my work cut out for me the next day, because Hawk was took it to the wall all the time. But as far as stories about Hawk, I mean, I wish the Hart Foundation could have wrestled the Legion of Doom or the Road Warriors a few more times. We had, I think, one match together, and it's a shame. I know that the last time Jim and the Hart Foundation was together as a team, we had been set up for the Hart Foundation to wrestle the Road Warriors of the Legion of Doom, and at the last minute they changed it, and I remember feeling really bad about it, because I really, really knew that there was some magic there that would never get tapped into, and I think at that time it was starting to show the Legion of Doom was starting to show the first real cracks as a team. And being a tag team in wrestling is tough, because a lot of these teams, almost all of them, maybe the exception of the Hart Foundation, they room together, they drive together, they fly together. After they're wrestling, they shower together. You see more of your tag partner than you ever will of your wife, and you're together so much that there always starts to become a bit of a clash of personalities, and you just start to grow, wear each other out. And I've seen it happen with the Bulldogs and everyone right down to the even brother teams like the Rougeaus. And it happened with the Legion of Doom a little bit in the end. And in respect to that, I mean, they always did manage to put their differences aside and get back together. But there was a certain time when they were just the most powerful name brand tag team there in the history of the business. And I really, really wanted to tap into that with the Hart Foundation. And I regret that we didn't.
One last question, because I know there's quite a bit of fans out there to see you and at Dream Night. What motivates you personally? Because wrestling has its ups and its downs, and what keeps you going?
Well, I had a stroke in 2002, which when I remember those times, you never forget it. Anyone that's probably been in a hospital or been in a serious situation with that kind of thing, if you find yourself just praying that you can do the simple things like walk and stand again, and I was lucky. I was blessed with a really good recovery, and I find myself today, after so many of my my own brother Owen and so many of my wrestling friends are no longer with us, and I really count my blessings, and I look at every day now as sort of a gift. You spend the first half of your life, you spend the second half of your life getting over the first half, and I'm looking forward to just sort of enjoying myself now. I like the fact that I wake up now and I don't have anybody kicking me in the head or power slamming me. I don't miss the wrestling. I think when I left, I can honestly say I think I did everything I could think of to do that meant anything to me. I miss the cities and I miss the fans sometimes, and I like to take opportunities like this to get out and see fans, especially on smaller independent wrestling shows. People might not appreciate sometimes, but I mean, I could be at WrestleMania, I think, anytime I wanted, and it's easy for me to walk out in front of 20,000 screaming fans at the Hall of Fame, but it means every bit as much to me to walk out here today and talk to a few hundred or 1,000 people. It's my way of giving back to the young wrestlers that are in the dressing room that are trying to make it, because I know I was there once.
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming through Chicago, and it's been an honor and pleasure to talk to you, and I know they're ready for you to get in the ring. So this has been Bret the Hitman Hart. There is only one. Thank you very much. We'll be right back with more Wrestling Resource Television.